Welcome. I'm Tom Colbert with the College of Architecture at the University of Houston normally, but this evening I'm here representing the board of the Rice Design Alliance, which I'm happy to be a member of. And I want to welcome you to the second forum of our series, Water Challenges Facing the Houston Region. The event tonight will discuss water quality issues and solutions to water shortages. We want to thank the Rice School of Architecture and Dean Sarah Whiting for their continued support for our organization and mission. We're also grateful to the Museum of Fine Arts Houston for the use of this terrific auditorium. This program is supported in part by folks listed on the screen and many others. We want to thank them for their generous support and for our panelists and moderators' time this evening as well. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you about other upcoming events. La Dauman will give the third annual Spotlight Lecture on September 7th, and legendary film title designer Pablo Ferro will be here on September 21. The 2011 Fall Lecture Series, Chinese Architecture, will begin on Wednesday, September 28th, and will continue through October. For more information on these and all other RDA programs, please visit our website, ricedesignalliance.org, or Google us. At this time, please silence your cell phones. And remember that there's no flash photography permitted during the forum. RDA members, staff members will be passing out and collecting note cards for your questions for the panelists after their presentations. So please save your questions and write them down for us. We'll sort them through them and give them to the panelists after they've all presented. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists and my co-moderator, Mark Greenblatt, who's a reporter with Channel 11 News and a longtime student of water issues. Mark's reports have won nearly every major national journalism award in television broadcasting, including the DuPont Columbia Award, the George Foster Peabody Award, a national headliner, a national Emmy for investigative reporting, 2 national Edward R. Murrow Awards, and an IRE Award for investigative reporters and editors, the IRE Medal. Our panelists are, in the order they will present this evening, Dr. Hanadi Rifai, a frequent or past participant in civic forum events, professor and director of environmental engineering, graduate program, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at U of H. Hanadi is a well-recognized expert in water quality, particularly with respect to our region. Chang is a civil engineer and graduate of U of H civil engineering program. Before Hanadi got there, I think. He's also Deputy Director of Public Works and Engineering for the City of Houston. It's safe to say, I believe, that John knows as much or more than anyone else about how Houston's incredibly complex water system works. He's responsible for operating and maintaining Houston's water and wastewater system. John Jacob, also no stranger to civic forums and Site Magazine, is the Director of the Texas Coastal Watersheds Program. He holds a joint appointment with Texas A&M's Sea Grant Program and with Texas AgriLife Extension Service. I think I got that right. He's a coastal community development specialist. His current project, Coastal Community Health and Resource Management, focuses on enabling coastal communities in Texas to improve quality of life in cities and towns while preserving and enhancing the natural coastal environment. So you can see why we wanted him to be here. And with that, before I turn the microphone over to Mike, I'd show a few slides that might remind some of our audience of what was presented last week and contextualize what we're talking about this evening. Here we go. Okay, a map of Texas showing all our incorporated cities and the city limits and all the waterways that we have. This is where all of our water comes from, for the most part. Groundwater originates on the surface. This is a slide shown by Jim Lester last week that I thought was particularly poignant and graphic. It's the Trinity River watershed, showing how water from that watershed flows through Dallas-Fort Worth to Houston. This is a slide of the Trinity River from the early 1900s, And you can see some people walking across it, and they're only ankle deep in water at best. But this is the Trinity River today. All the extra water comes from the city of Dallas, which draws from many other watersheds to feed its water supply system. So this extra water has come through the city of Dallas in every way. This is Lake Houston, as HGAC sees our land use today. And the green is open, undeveloped land, or parkland, or golf courses, that kind of thing. And yellow is single-family residential. This is the way they see it urbanizing within a few years. The lake completely urbanized. And with that, I think the issue of water quality and room for improvement is graphically clear. And I'd like to introduce, ask Mark to come up.
Well, thank you so much. And I think I want to begin just by thanking the Rights Design Alliance for putting this forum together, I think, and to congratulate everybody for actually giving up some of your evening to come and listen and talk about water. This has become, researching water and reporting on water quality has truly become one of what I consider to be one of the most important chapters in my career as an investigative reporter. In reporting on water quality, our hope is, and our purpose is not to alarm folks, but simply to inform people, because we think we want to let you know about some things that we think that you should know about. And let me just give you a quick window into how I got interested in water quality and why I'm so interested to hear from this very distinguished panel tonight. About a year ago, I had no concept that water quality was an issue that I needed to care about. I really didn't care about water that much. I didn't know all that much about the shortage issues that were going on. I was fairly ignorant about it, and I certainly never really stopped to think about if there was ever any issues anywhere with water. I guess I just thought that if there were any issues, certainly they, whoever they are, would turn it off and would solve that problem. I've learned a little bit, I have a bit of a different perspective now a year later. And one of the things, we see headlines around the country right now. USA Today has run stories, New York Times has run stories. We've seen stories about pharmaceuticals being entering into our water supply that we may be exposed to. Pharmaceuticals that don't get filtered out at most municipal water treatment facilities. If someone's taking Viagra, you may get a little bit of that in very low levels, we now believe, which may be a good thing. But there are other kinds of pharmaceuticals that has generated some concern among folks. And the question is really the fascinating thing to me is that nobody actually tests for this on a regular basis. So we don't really know what's in our water supplies. Recently, I was kind of fascinated when 35 cities across America were found to have this hexavalent chromium. Am I saying that right? Hexavalent chromium. The thing that Aaron Brockovich had discovered that caused that the big movie. That lets in 35 large city water supplies. And again, this is something that's not regularly tested for and that folks really don't often know if it's in your water. So the question is in these amounts that people are finding these elements, should we really worry? Is this something to really even care about, or should we just go about, on our daily life? The reason why I think it's important to educate ourselves and learn more and hopefully fund further science research into water quality, it became very starkly evident to me when we were in the midst of reporting on an ongoing series on low-level radioactive contamination in drinking water supplies. And I rolled up into a small town in the hill country, and I rolled into the city manager's office, and I said to him, let's sit down and talk about your water quality here. And he began the conversation by saying, Mark, can I offer you a bottle of water? Because I don't drink the water that I serve to my residents. And at that point, the conversation took a fairly serious turn. And I said, well, James, tell me what's going on? What would make you make such an unusual statement? And he began to tell me that the water in the hill country, where he is a city manager, was actually contaminated with enough of this stuff that it had made the water distribution pipes that bring water to people's homes. It had built up over the years inside those pipes and made the pipes so radioactive themselves that recycle yards don't take them anymore and turn them away as essentially radioactive waste. And when he showed that to me with a Geiger counter, I started paying a little bit more attention and thinking about how, as I learned, the EPA and all of these tests that we hope that they will shut off the spigot if there is something really serious out there, they actually stop the water quality testing at the point of distribution into the pipes. And so where these contaminants are building up, and it's not just radioactive contaminants, we now know it's things like arsenic. The pipes themselves can actually act like magnets and just attract concentrated forms of these of metallic contaminants into our water supply. And as you'll see in an upcoming Channel 11 report on Saturday night at 7 o'clock, these contaminants can potentially be released in concentrated bursts into our water supply. And nobody ever tests for this, and nobody ever knows, because it's not part of the current federal regulation. So all of these issues and more, whether it's arsenic, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's dioxins, whether it's something that gets into our water supply, even at times, as we've learned, where various municipalities are able to tell you that we indeed meet all federal guidelines, I would simply invite you to watch Channel 11 Saturday night at 7 o'clock for a more detailed view into some of the challenges with where the guidelines are and what they don't look for. With that, I just want to tell you how excited I am to sit and learn tonight and take part in a fascinating discussion with some of the people that I really know through the years to be some of the smartest people in Houston on these issues, and I'm excited. So with that, we can begin.
Hanadi, Rifai.
Good evening, and thank you again for being here. We're all delighted to kind of have the opportunity to share with you some of our thoughts on one of my favorite topics, and that's water. So, key ideas that I wanted to cover today, and I know I've only got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to use that most effectively. The first key idea is that water is a really limited resource, and when you think about water, the model should be energy. As much as we worry about the energy today, we really ought to be worrying about water at the same level. Second key idea is that poor water quality has multifaceted ramifications for Houston and the region. We are now better than other places economically speaking. However, think about the drought. Think about not having water in the long term, perhaps for even the next year, and what that might do and how that would change your life over the next year. And that would give you an idea about why these two sessions we've had are so important. Lastly, and most importantly, we can do something about it, and we should. And that's the message that we'd like you to take back with you tonight. So starting out, a very good introduction by Mark about what's in our drinking water. A while back, not too long ago, within the last year, an organization published a study about water in 100 cities, and they ranked Houston as being number 95 on that list. And their argument was that in some of our water, we have some things perhaps less than desirable. The idea behind ranking us as number 95 was the fact that there were about 46 chemicals at trace levels in the water, but at the same time they do acknowledge that there were 147 other chemicals that were not really there. And I want to encourage you, possibly many of you get this in the mail with one of your bills for water, and you probably never have bothered to look at it. I would encourage you to actually open it up and take a look, because that's an annual report that the city puts in your water bill at least once a year, and they tell you about all the sampling data and what is in the water. And I've looked at it for at least my area, which we're in the purple zone, that's the main city of Houston, and we don't exceed any of the guidelines and standards. Now, temper that with the fact of what you just heard, that it's not necessary that the city is not required to test for everything. So I do share the concern that when Lake Houston is our main water supply, that we're not thinking into the future. We've already heard about the developing watershed. So all the red areas are urban, and they're expected to get more urban over time. And that means Lake Houston water quality will be further stressed because of development. We will be adding more sediment that will make the water more turbid. It'll allow for possibly more eutrophication, a little bit of an unbalance in the ecosystem, which up to this point has been somewhat resilient, but with more pressure on it, perhaps that would not continue to be the case. We're going to face rising treatment costs. We'll talk about the cost of water in just a bit. And we'll begin to deal with these emerging pollutants like the pharmaceuticals, the endocrine disruptors, and the personal care products, among others, fire retardants, for example, maybe some other compounds you might have heard about. So having said that then, it's also important to recognize that water quality is not just about Lake Houston and the water that we drink. It's really all around you. In the back, I saw copies of this report from Houston Future study about water quality that I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in. Some of the graphics that you see on my slides are from that study. On the left, I'm showing this humongous network, live network of sampling data where a lot of organizations partner together, including citizens like yourself, and they measure water quality and report on it. And then people in research like myself and my other panelists and Mark look at this data and basically make some assessments and some recommendations into the future. The picture on the right, what you see in red, are areas or streams or bayous that have an impairment in water quality, meaning there's something wrong about the water quality. It doesn't meet the Clean Water Act standards. It's not fishable, swimmable, which is one of the requirements of our federal environmental regulations. So let's take a look about what's in the bayous. And I know I just mentioned the word fishable, swimmable, and many of you may think, well, I don't really want to go swimming in White Oak Bayou. And I would understand that clearly. You're not a kid anymore, but kids would not share your opinion. They would definitely want to swim in the bayou if they could. But the point that I would like to make is that in the end, all that water ends up in Galveston Bay. And so our oysters would be contaminated with bacteria, which is the image that I'm showing here is some of our data for E. coli bacteria in the water from 2001 to 2008, with the larger the diamond indicating the larger the level of bacteria. And keep in mind that the allowable level is the smallest size diamond on that graph. So you can tell that in the inner city in White Oak, Buffalo, and Grays, the more urban parts of the city, the levels of bacteria are way above what they should be. And that's something that's being currently addressed. There's a large initiative known as the Bacteria Implementation Group, and they're working in a collaborative to try to address this problem. Now, what is in Galveston Bay? I've been working with the Galveston Bay Estuary Program, even when they were a national funded program from EPA for the last 20 years. We know when we wrote State of the Bay report that some of the key issues are going to be the toxics coming from some of our vibrant industries, things like the dioxins, the polychlorinated biphenyls that you heard about, the PAHs, metals, and again, elevated bacterial levels. So in 2008, for example, I'm showing some of the PCB concentrations that we detected in the waters going from the Houston Ship Channel into Upper Galveston Bay. And the only acceptable levels are the green dots on that map. So you see that really whatever is in the water is really not acceptable and way beyond the standards. And that's something that's a lot harder to address because these toxics, they're in the sediment, they're in the water. Sometimes they tend to be in the air, and management of these pollutants is really a system-wide, rather complex endeavor that costs a lot of money. Other parts of the country have not had much success dealing with those types of problems in that regard. Our groundwater, unfortunately, is our little secret, but we're not able to use as much of it. Groundwater quality is generally good, with a few exceptions, as you've heard about arsenic, which is a natural occurrence in the region. We cannot use groundwater as much because of subsidence. Up until recently, about 30 or 40% of our water was from groundwater. It tasted really good and really didn't require much treatment. That's no longer the case. Because of the subsidence, we are now pulling a lot more water from Lake Houston than ever before. We're almost 100% reliance on Lake Houston, and that has stressed our water supply in this particular scenario with the drought that we have been facing and encountering. So my last thought to leave you with today is water right price. So I made the analogy to energy. And the reason being is we're complaining about $4 gasoline. per gallon. I'm one of those people. So, but in the end, as we just mentioned, bottled water, most of us don't hesitate to pay $2 or sometimes $4 at the ballpark for a bottle of water. That puts it at much, much higher than what you pay for gasoline at the pump. And in the end, if you do look at your water bill, as I do, you will note that you really only pay a cent or two per gallon from the city. So how can that be possible that you've got such a large disconnect, basically, between what it takes a city to get water to your home? That's including wastewater disposal as well. So sending it to you and taking it back, they're only charging you a cent or two per gallon. So when you think about that, and again, for those of you that have been trying to keep your plants alive, your trees, I'm going to lose at least one of mine, you will note that your water bill is probably close to being 30 or 50% of what you pay for power. And that's assuming you set your thermostat high enough so that your energy bill isn't outrageously high. But it's getting to the point where your water bill is going to be something that really hits your pocketbook, even at 1 or 2 cents a gallon from the city delivered to your home. So that's something to think about. The other is the article that came recently in the Chronicle that we might have an extended drought period, perhaps into next year. Soaring temperatures, it's been incredibly, incredibly hot and dry, something that I didn't imagine we'd have for so long in Houston. So blackouts and water conservation may be here to stay, something that we really need to think about. The other being is improving water quality, because improving water quality will ensure that we have a healthy and vibrant Galveston Bay. We must not impede freshwater inflows to Galveston Bay. That is absolutely critical. And we must think about maybe perhaps more aggressive conservation targets that have been presented in forums like this one before, and possibly even thinking about reuse. So if anything, the message that I'd like to leave you with today is that really water is much more precious than we thought about it before, and perhaps we've taken it for granted, and it may be time to change our mindset a little bit and do something about it. Thank you very much.
Good. All right. Well, maybe they were just kidding when they said something about the smartest folks in Houston. I don't know. I'm definitely, you can tell already, right? I'm showing you. Well, it is definitely a great honor to be invited to talk to you, to say something a little bit about water. And I'm going to bridge the areas between the water quality and the water quantity issues tonight. As was said, I manage a little program called the Texas Coastal Watershed Program. So when we think about watersheds, it really does integrate everything. We do live in a water-abundant region, no doubt about it. Yes, we are in a little bit of a drought right now, but there is a lot of water here. We get abundant rainfall. As Tom showed you, there's a lot of rivers that come through here. So normally, we do have quite a bit of water. And not only do we have a lot of water that runs through here, we have a lot of available water because of the foresight of our city fathers some years ago. And what is that doing? That's not supposed to be, holy moly. Okay, all right. Because of the foresight of city planners many years ago who built great large public works like Lake Houston has been talked about, and Lake Livingston, the largest dam in the area, we have quite a bit of available water. Our regional water planning group, every part of the state has one of these, is called Region H. And they have looked to the future as well. And according to their numbers, we have enough water, even for the 4 million people who are coming our way. And even when you take into account what they call the drought of record, in other words, they don't plan for the good times, they plan for the bad times. So according to their calculations, which I have no reason to doubt, if we were to have a repetition of the drought of the 1950s, if the drought that we're in now were to become the great drought of the 20-teens, then we would be able, if it was no worse than that drought, that we would be able to get through that drought. Now, we have a lot of water, but we don't have all the pipes, all the dams, everything we need to necessarily get it where it needs to go. So we're going to have to invest $13 billion between now and 2060 when all these other people who are coming here. So as I said, I don't have any reason to doubt these calculations. The question, though, is what about Galveston Bay? Because it's not just about us. It's also about Galveston Bay. So the question is is there enough water for all of these 4 million people who are coming to have a nice lawn, as most of them probably want to have, and for there to be a healthy Galveston Bay? This is the critical question that we face now, and will be the question, and will be the environmental question in our area for the decades to come. And this is far from being a settled question. This is a question of great controversy, of great discussion. There are people with goodwill on both sides, but there are heated arguments in the middle. Okay? So this is not going away. It has not been decided. For my part, I would tend to side with those who say that there's not quite, we don't have enough water for the 4 million people who are coming, and for everybody to have a nice green lawn like that. I do believe that we have enough water for the 4 million people, for a vibrant city, but not including that lawn. So this is the question then, this is what I want to address in my short remarks tonight. Well, why should we care? What difference does it really make in terms of Galveston Bay? Is that something we should really worry about? What does it mean to us? Is it part of our psyche? Is it part of who we are? Well, certainly it's a place of beauty. We all know it. We know there are wildlife wonders. People come from around the world to do bird watching here. Who among us has not taken our children or our grandchildren down to cross the bay at Bolivar on the ferry and to point out those lovely porpoises and to commune with them? This is part of our Houston-Galveston experience. And certainly the recreation, the chance to get out there to fish. It's a wonderful estuary, and it's a very productive estuary. Not only is there recreational fishing, it's a tremendous repository of shrimp and other kinds of, and regular finfish as well. In fact, conservatively, this estuary provides our local economy with at least $3 billion. That's just in what we can count. That's just in what we see. That doesn't account for the intangible values of the sense of place that this wonderful area might provide to us. So the question then is, well, what is it that we're going to leave our grandchildren? Are we going to leave them a place that is diminished, that is less than we found? Would it make a difference? Well, if the freshwater flows are not in there, both in the quantity and the pattern, the pulses that they need, the bay will change. It won't disappear. There'll still be water there, but it'll be different from what we have today. We have been at a juncture like this before in our history. This is White Oak Bayou. To live on the Gulf Coast, we have to impose drainage. We cannot live on this coastal plain without doing something about the drainage. We can be all as tree huggers as we want to be. We have to dig drains. That's the only way we're going to live here. When this was built, the thought was brute force engineering. It's drainage and it's drainage alone. Dig the channel out, get the water out of our way. We didn't really think about, well, what about White Oak Bayou? What about the values that it has? Are we losing something by destroying those values? And so we did that to just about all of our streams that run through the city. Brays Bayou, what did we lose there? What could that have been in terms of our city? Now it's essentially a sewer. It's sterile. There's not much that really contributes there. But there was one bright, shining example that we need to look back to. Because there were some prescient people who stood up for the one last bayou and said, no, we don't need to do this. This place is special. And you all know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Buffalo Bayou. Because people like Terry Hershey and the first George Bush said, no, Buffalo Bayou is unique and it is special to us. Yes, we need it for drainage, but we don't have to just apply a brute force engineering method here. We can save this, it can provide us with the drainage, but it can also provide us with these other values that we need and that we love. And so, in fact, because of their presence, of their foresight, we have this picture here of Buffalo Bayou steaming into downtown Houston. You all know exactly what date I'm talking about here. In June 9th, I believe it was, 2001, with Tropical Storm Allison. And I would argue that that storm, a concrete channel, as the engineers would have imagined it, would not have been able to handle that storm. And there would have been damage. There would have been sadness. There would have been destruction. But as you see this picture here, at least right here, nobody's hurt. Now farther down, where White Oak Bayou comes in, there's a lot of people hurt, okay? Because they weren't thinking about nature, they weren't valuing these kind of things. So, and the point here too is that this is iconic of us, of Houston. When you want to show somebody a picture of what Houston is all about, where do you take your picture from? You take it from Buffalo Bayou. Because it's that intersection of the built environment, the green environment. So that foresight of folks who said, we need this bayou. This is part of who we are. Okay? This is for our children. And we should thank them for having done that. So now it's our turn today. But our turn is a little bit larger. Our turn then is back to Galveston Bay. And we have choices to make. Sure, we have enough water. Okay? No problem. We can do that. But we are not so poor that we cannot say, let's take care of Galveston Bay. We are not that poor. We have resources, we have intelligence, we have imagination, and we can do so much better. We can save this bay, we can leave it better than it is for our children, rather than as a diminished resource. So in the few minutes I have, was that a little thing going up there? Not yet, okay. I will want to just address some of the ways that we can do this, because it's not about wearing an environmental hair shirt here, okay? This is not something that's going to hurt us. We can deal with this in a way that might actually be a little better for us. So let me use as my framework here for addressing this, the lawn. We all love the lawn, right? Everybody loves the lawn, okay? This really bridges the water quality and the water quantity issues. Half of our municipal water supply goes for this. There you go. Okay? This is from Region H. This is straight out of Region H. Lifted this. This is not some tree hugger publication. Okay? I want you to know I'm doing it. Okay? In case Julie says I'm not doing the right stuff here. Okay? Straight out of them. 1/2 of our water, in our seasonal water supply, the water supply that we have to go for, goes for landscaping. Okay? So this is a trade-off. Your lawn, the bay. That's what we have to be thinking about. So that is the low-hanging fruit in terms of water conservation. There's a lot that we can do there. Okay? But not only are lawns a big issue in terms of water supply and using water to keep that green, and it takes a lot of water to keep that place green, it is also a potential area, a potential contributor of pollutants, some of the pollutants that Hanadi talked about. Fertilizers, pesticides. Because you got to keep this lawn in good shape here. You see that guy that lives right there? That's a lawn Nazi. That person reports directly to the Homeowners Association. And if your lawn is not perfect, you get a little brown patch out here, or the chinch bugs get out there, or it's brown, they are going to come unglued and they are going to report you. You're going to wish that you... So what are you going to do? We'll come to that. That's the solution for you. So what are you going to do here? So you got to have fertilizer. Let's just take a pesticide, for example. And you've got this person looking over your shoulder and you say, well, it says here on the label, add 2 ounces per gallon. But you don't want to play around. You're busy. You don't have time to be screwing with this stuff. I don't want to just barely get it enough. I want those chinch bugs dead. I want the lawn green. I want the brown patch gone. 2 ounces, you take that little bottle here, you pour the whole thing, okay, because you want to make sure they are dead. So the very stuff that we're adding here is ending up in the bay, okay? Nitrogen, phosphorus, things like atrazine. That's a pesticide in your weed and feed. Of course, I know nobody here uses weed and feed, but okay. that is going in the bay. There is atrazine. They test for that. It's in the bay. It comes from people, good upstanding citizens. These are not criminals. Okay? They're trying to do the right thing. All right, so what's the solution? Why, you saw it a minute ago. There you go, right? That'll take care of it. Isn't that the solution? No. Not only no, but hell no. Of course it's not the solution. Okay? We can do better. Well, this is the xeriscape, right? Or the zero-scape, as some folks like to call it. Okay? No, we don't. Like I said, we don't have to wear an environmental hair shirt. Okay? But we've got to think about conservation. Okay? Again, let's use a little imagination. We've got lots of possibilities here in Houston. This is an environmentally water-conserving, non-polluting landscape. We call it a water-smart landscape. Okay? This is not ugly. This is beautiful. Okay? It's a great landscape. Okay? And it's, the thing about Houston is you can't just say, oh, we've got to plant a water-conserving landscape. Because you full well know that, 2 years out of 5, maybe we're a little dry. Not quite as dry as now, but we're a little dry. But 3 years out of 5, we're wet. So you go out there and you plant stuff from West Texas, you put in mountain laurel and buffalo grass. Well, most years, that's going to crater. You're in trouble. So you've got to plant the right kind of plants from our area that are either native or they're adapted to our area, and they'll do just fine. And in fact, my favorite plant, Chris LaChance here is going to laugh about this, but see that little guy right there? The palmetto. Emblematic of what a water-smart landscape should be about. Okay? It can take full sun, it can take full shade, it can take the biggest flood you can give it, it can take the drought right now, and it's doing just fine. Okay? So we know how to build beautiful landscapes that can survive our weather. Okay? And it's not about being against grass. You can still have grass. Oh, I'm trying to get done here. Okay. You can plant those nice wildflowers there, cut those down. But it's about the simple things we know how to do. The number one thing that you can do right now, add compost. Top dress your lawn with finely screened compost. Number one thing you can do. Increases the water holding capacity of your lawn. You can mow high. Don't back it. All those kind of things we've been talking about till we're blue in the face. Okay, we know how to do it. Don't wait till it wilts. It's probably wilting right now, but most years wait till it wilts. So we know how to do that. But the deal with conservation is it doesn't come cheap. And I want to make this statement. I want to make it quite clear. Conservation is not on the table at the high enough level that it needs to be. Okay, it is not up there. We don't have the political will to make conservation where it needs to be. It's not cheap, okay? But we need 1 million acre feet of water, okay, for the people that are coming. That's a lot of water, acre, foot deep, okay? 1 million of those to meet our needs, 1 million and change. Okay. One example, Allen's Creek Reservoir. This is the only dam that is proposed. There's some other ones that are possibilities. This is the one in the plan. For 100,000 acre feet, this is going to cost $200 million. That's not free water. So why should we think conservation is going to be cheap? Okay. So I just did a little back of the envelope calculation here. Give me $10 million a year. Change, right? Chunk change from the $13 billion. And I'm going to give you a water conservation corps. Okay. 60 extension agents I will field all over this place. Here's Chris LaChance. Chris, raise your hand. She is a water conservation agent working right in my office. I'll put 60 of her out across the city. We will make an impact. And I will have left over $2 to $3 million for advertising. You say, oh, well, advertising doesn't make any difference. Yes, it does. You look at the Don't Mess with Texas campaign. That has made a big difference. They get way more money in savings from trash pickup than they put into their program. So yes, we can invest in this, and I will give you at least 100,000 acre feet for that same, that's about the same money we're talking about as Allen's Creek Reservoir. And not only will I save you the acre feet of water from the supply point of view, that's that many less tons of nitrogen, phosphorus, atrazine, etc. Okay, I am done, except for one last part. The other emerging trend that I'll just talk about real briefly, There are people, we think most of them are coming to the suburbs, but a lot of people want to move here as well. They want to move into town, okay? This has water quality implications, because you see this? This has a lawn. This doesn't have a lawn, okay? This is not rocket science. No lawn means water savings, okay? And if we put, let's just take back of the envelope calculations, if we put 1 million people, of those people coming into these areas, then I will save you 100,000 acre-feet a year. This is not chump change. Of those 1 million acre-feet that we need, this is a big piece of it. And back of the envelope calculators again, 300,000 pounds of nitrogen. I think that would calculate out well on a TMDL, would it not, Hanadi?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, okay? This kind of issue needs to be at a policy level, okay? The form of our city, where people want to move. Yes, not everybody wants to move here, but a lot of people do. This is the number of people turning 65, okay? These folks have a little bit different idea about things. And they're not your grandparents' grandparents. They're not even your parents' grandparents. They might be. You might be. Okay? And they don't want to live the same way. A lot of them don't want to be living over here. They want to be living over here where the coffee shop is around the corner. They don't want to be mowing yards. And they're tired of those lawn Nazis, you know? Get rid of them. So, as a matter of public policy, of public water policy, this has got to be on the table. It is not. When those folks meet at Region H to talk about these things, this does not come up, okay? So I know we're all about, we can't, we don't want to tell people where to go. There are people that want to do this. Let's make it easy for them because it has water quality implications. I am just so close to them. Okay? And it's not just about moving into high-density places. It's about medium-density places. This is Montrose, okay? Compared to where I live in Clear Lake, it's really dense. It's not all that dense, but it's still a lot less lawn. Maybe it's half the lawn there. So if 2 million of those people decide to come in, that's 100,000 acre-feet there, okay? If Fulshire develops this way, that's a lot less water that we're pulling out of the Trinity and out of the San Jacinto, okay? Ecological implications to that, as well as the same thing we talked about, pounds, tons of nitrogen, okay, that have an impact. So, the almost last slide, and, you get some walkable urbanism, but I'll just go with that. One point here to make about the integration of things and trying to get away from silos. This is a water quality choo-choo. Okay, is that clear to everyone that this is a water quality choo-choo? I won't ask you to answer because we don't have time. It is a water quality choo-choo and a water supply choo-choo because it enables walkability. It enables people to live in more compact areas that have smaller lawns. Okay, this is the number one enabler of this. So this is the little engine that can and that will. Okay, and it's not just I'll let that go because I'm done. Okay, but it's about saving the bay. It's about leaving a legacy for our children and our grandchildren. We can do it. Yes, we will need some engineering and even some brute force engineering. No question about it. Okay, that's part of our living on this planet. But we can have a vibrant, livable, wonderful city, even with 8 million people, I truly believe, okay, and we can have this. But it will require imagination and foresight, and we will have to put our heads to the task. It is time, in more ways than one.
And good evening. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity here tonight to speak before you. Appreciate the Rice Design Alliance to allow me the opportunity. When Tom first talked to me about coming to talk about water shortage, I thought, what shortage? We don't have plenty of water. Then I thought maybe, this is a good opportunity for me to hear to present the facts. But before I start, since I'm here representing the city of Houston, I feel obligated to clarify one thing that Rifai said, the report that she was referring to. Yes, the report did rank City of Houston's water quality out of 95th out of the 100, but we strongly disagree with the methodology they used, and let me explain to you why. They judged your water quality based on the chemical that detected in the water. Their number one water is forest. They test 2,500 samples a year. We test 52,000 a year. Why? They have two input source supplied in their whole system. We have close to 100. We have to test every supply input source, and we test multiple times. When you test the same source multiple times, 52,000 versus 2,500, the chances you detect traceable, remember what she said, traceable chemical in the water greatly increase. That's why we have far more number of traceable chemical in the water than forest. But they do have a chemical that tested in the water that exceeded regulatory requirement. How many we have? 0. So just want to clarify that. Well, I was told I only have 10 minutes. And since John took 5 minutes of mine, I need to speak really fast. City of Houston has successfully accomplished the goals of have prepared to secure adequate water supply. And in the process, we also achieved the goal to protect the environment and to promote water conservation, and I'll explain shortly. The key to success is to have a long-range strategic plan. Without long-range strategic planning, you will be caught by surprise. You will be caught without options. And as many of you know, many of our Texas cities does have that dilemma. And I don't want to mention the names. Long-range planning, you have to know what you need to know. Those are facts that you need to consider. You need to know how much water supply you have, what is your demand, what is your system, and what is your treatment capacity. And you also need to know what your customers are, what their needs are. You need to know who's your suppliers, who's your alliance, who's your resources. And as you can see, we get all kinds of alliance and suppliers to give us the supply source, and the Texas Water Development Board provide the financial assistance to allow us to build those projects. And you also need to accurately project the demand. This is just a study that we have done, and you can see how many methods we have used, and each method come up with different projection, which one you believe, which one you're going to use. After you figure all those out, this is where we are. We have plenty of water. At the time this chart was made, you see those dotted lines, still says pending. We have already secured those permits. So the top line is, I don't want to push the wrong button. You see the top line, that is the total water rights we have. I think it's the top line. Yeah. Okay. This is the top line. This is how much water rights we have now secured. This is the projected water demand that we have until 2060. And as you can see, we have a long way to go to reach what we have. How did that happen? We have very smart forefathers who plan ahead. They think ahead, and they have the foresight to know what to do. In 50s, 60s, and 70s, they built reservoirs, and they built treatment plants, and we started transmission program in '85 to convert from surface water, from groundwater to surface water, and this is what we have. We have the largest lake supply lake. That's Lake Livingston there, and Lake Conroe, Lake Houston, and this is the site that John was talking about, Allen's Creek. It's not built yet. And by source, Lake Livingston, we have 78% of the water total supply source coming from Lake Livingston. We have about 16% from Lake Conroe and 6% from Lake Houston. Right now, we only use 64% of our water supply from Lake Livingston. And Lake Conroe and Lake Houston is 16%, and we use 20% of groundwater. Now, it's just until very recently, we started using Lake Conroe water, and we have not used that since 1988, so that's just because of the drought condition. That's the 3 lakes we have and the reservoirs. And we built treatment plants, we built repump stations, because you can see all the plants on the east side of the city, and you have to pump the water from the east side to the west side, and because of the friction loss in the pipe, by the time they reach to the middle of the town, they lost the pressure, they have to repressurize them. And we also have groundwater facilities to meet the, as a supplement to meet the peak demand, such as the summer. We built a massive transmission program to do that, to transport water from the east side to the west side. We are the 4th largest city in the United States. We have a large system. We have 470,000 customer accounts, more than 1 million connections, almost 3 million customers, and we have 7,500 miles of water lines. As I said, we have successfully converted from groundwater to surface water. You can see the groundwater production has decreased dramatically over the last several decades, and the surface water production has increased. And our system is so adequate that even this year, I just want to show you the August production. The red line shows the average daily production from 2005 to 2010. It's in the 400 million gallons per day range. This year, we have 5 exceeded that. And the average day for this month is 628. And on this particular day, we have reached 660 million gallons a day on that single day. But our total system treatment capacity is more than 800 million gallons a day. As the city ordinance specified, the trigger for stage 2 conservation is if you reach 80% of your capacity for 3 consecutive days. We never get there. The reason the stage 2 was triggered now is not because of lack of treatment capacity, it's because of the lake level. What are we doing now? Well, we're planning for the next 40 years. We're doing the Loose Bayou Interbasin Transfer Project. We want to move from the water from the Trinity River, which we have plenty, to Lake Houston, because that's where we're going to need the water. And we're going to expand the Northeast plan to treat those water once they get there, and we build the transmission system. When the water has been traded, we need to deliver them to the customer. And Loose Bayou, those are just the facts. I'll let you guys read it. And here's the Trinity River, and we're going to build it here to Lake Houston. And that's the Northeast plan. The current capacity is 80 million gallons a day. We're going to expand to 300 million gallons a day. That's very significant. The cost, of course, is very expensive, but it will be shared by City of Houston and the Regional Water Authority. We're all partners in this one. We're going to build more transmission lines to deliver the treated water to our customers. And what's in the plan for the future? Well, we're going to consider all those options. Adams Creek is one of them. As John said, it's the only one designated reservoir site in the state in Region H. we're going to think about reuse, we're going to think about desalination, we're going to talk about imported groundwater. There's plenty of groundwater in central Texas. They own the land and they have groundwater, have no use for it. They want to sell them, and we're looking at those options. East Texas has plenty of water. We'll also consider the option of getting water from those. So all those things, we have to do what our forefather has done for us, is plan ahead and learn from that and plan for the future. And those are just the facts for Allen's Creek. And it's authorized by the state legislation in 1999, and we have to start the project and get construction started by September 1st of 2025. And it's going to be a shared project with Brazos River Water Authority. And the city owns 70% of the water rights. BRA owns 30%. And we are currently working with BRA to start the plan for the project. The environmental impact study is already started with the help from Texas Water Development Board. This is the site that you're already seeing. And while we're doing all this, we are protecting the environment. When we apply for the reused water rights, we entered an agreement with the environmental interest group. It's not easy. It took 7 years. We will agree to release 50% of the return flow to the bay. That makes John happy, because his bay now have plenty of water. But we also receive plenty of reuse flows. So that's the part I not necessarily agree with John. We can both have a beautiful lawn and a beautiful bay. And as Mayor Parker said, we can have both. We don't have to choose one. And we also promote conservation. City Council passed an ordinance in April last year to promote conservation for multifamilies. Why choose multifamily? Well, each of you, if you live in a house, you pay your water bill. You know how much you pay for the water. If you live in an apartment, your bill most likely is paid. You don't care. Water is open, water faucets is open, water is flowing, you let them flow. Well, if we can promote or give incentive to the apartment owner or operator to conserve water in the multifamily structure, then we can save a lot of water. So what we did in this is we set money aside and we said, if you can prove to us, you set a baseline, in 6 months you can save X percentage of the water in your water usage, then we will give you a rebate. Based on the level of save you achieved, you will get a different level of rebate. So we are promoting water conservation. We are promoting protecting the environment. And we also, in cooperation with the various agencies, Texas TCEQ and Subsidence District, North Harris County Regional Water Authority, we built this nice facility. I want to show you the next one. Water Education Center, and we host our annual water festival there. We invite the school kids to there because we find out the school kids, once they learn conservation, they will go back actually tell their parents, hey, you're wasting water. And so we find this is very effective. So we organize those activities. If any of you interested to have your kids' school to organize such activity, welcome to go to the city website. You will find the contact information there. You can arrange a tour. And with that, I back to Tom.
With that, I'll ask our panelists to go to the front, field some questions, and proceed some from But while we're getting this organized, I want to mention that Jason Fenwick's, who was the speaker at last week's forum, was kind enough to bring enough copies for everyone from a recent Center for Houston's Future conference on water. Jason, are they in the back?
Both sides.
Both sides. Okay, so on your way out, look for these. They're really good documents. They're full of interesting information. A few questions from last week. Is there evidence that fracking and injection of industrial waste chemicals into the ground is detrimental to our water supply sources?
It's a question to me.
I think it's for the panel.
That's a loaded question, as I say. There's still quite a bit of debate on the topic. There's emerging evidence that there is impact on resources. It's not final. We don't really know the answer to that. There's studies now that are gathering data to see to what extent this practice will actually impact water quality.
Are there plans to reduce water losses from evaporation from reservoirs and broken ground pipes and cooling towers?
Well, I can't do anything about the evaporation. That's the loss that's occurred. Yes, we're doing everything we can to fix the water pipe leaks. We know there's a lot of them there. As of today, we have 1,028, and yesterday is the record 1,033 backlog. And we receive more than 100 confirmed water leak every day. And we are doing with our internal force as well as the contractor to do everything possible to fix them as quickly as we can. We just can't get them all at the same time. So we do recognize a lot of water is lost through the breakage. We do realize that, and we do everything we can to correct that problem.
Why does the city of Houston not talk about water conservation?
Well, well, we did. I just showed you. We are talking about water conservation, and we are.
We just want you to talk a little more, that's all. But you are. They are doing quite a good work.
How can the city get conservation amounts so that per capita utilization matches San Antonio? San Antonio, should we aim for that?
Well, we are reducing our GPCD. GPCD stands for gallons per capita per day. We are reducing our GPCD every year, and we are meeting the state requirement to reduce the GPCD based on our conservation plan. But GPCD is not a best way to measure your usage, and I'll give you an example. When you change from single house residential to multi-house, like John showed you the picture, when you build more townhouses, your GPCD will reduce significantly. So when Houston switched from single house to multi-family house, like townhouses or condos, our GPCD goes down significantly, especially in the middle 90s. At the time, I told DCEQ, I'd love to take the credit, but I can't. Because I know I didn't do much to cause the GPCD goes down. It's the development pattern. So I don't think GPCD is the most accurate way to measure your usage. As far as San Antonio, I don't want to compare our system to theirs because they didn't plan ahead. They had an opportunity to build reservoir, they didn't. They put themselves in the situation where they are now. They don't have any surface water supply sources. They have to take a more dramatic measure than we do. You do what's necessary to get by.
And I would just make a quick comment on that. I agree with what June is saying. And we can't, we necessarily compare it with San Antonio because they are a lot drier than we are. But, and I agree they didn't have the foresight and the planning to build perhaps the reservoirs they should have built. But they have at least shown what can be done with some aggressive education and conservation measures. In other words, you can bring it down, and you can bring it down quite a bit. Now the question would be, do we want to do that? And I would argue that, it's a no regrets kind of thing. We ought to do it anyway, even if we do have enough water. Let's give the bay a little more anyway.
I thought I'd bring the conversation over to Dr. Rifai for a moment. And following up on one of your slides that you put up that had that long list of all those chemicals that were up there. And without just for a moment talking about one municipality or whatnot, because I think a lot of water supplies, a lot of people have small municipal utility districts that they have to get their water from, and a lot of people are seeing some of the same contaminants in their water supply in low levels. I wondered if you could comment for a little while on where we are in science today as to how the federal government looks at contaminants as individual contaminants versus how one might actually interact with another synergistically, somewhat like a chemistry lab. And where I'm coming from with this question is, in a lab back in high school, my 101 chemistry class, I remember you'd have one chemical over here and one chemical over here, and they'd both be very stable. How much do we really know in science right now, and how much have we tested for once all of these things start mixing together?
Well, from a drinking water standpoint, I don't know that we know enough about these emerging chemicals and emerging pollutants. The way to think about it is, getting these things out of the water is a lot harder than you might think. So current treatment technologies, as you have alluded to earlier, cannot address a large variety of these contaminants. Our technology is really not intended to target those specific, what I call the esoterics, or the micropollutants. You might think about them that way. So that's one thing to think about. We also clearly don't understand their interactions and what they do necessarily when they're all present together in the water. So the challenge would be, as we think about water, that having enough water isn't really the only part of the equation. It's what's in that water. What is it going to get or take to get it to your home so that you can actually drink it safely without worrying about what's inside it. So that's a very important point.
And here's a personal question for you. So in your home and wherever you live, what do you do? Do you have a filter that's in place? What do you do?
That's a great question. Actually, I wanted to explain that a little bit because we know that people certainly have a bit of a confusion kind of thing. So you can filter the water for two different reasons. One is taste, to make it taste better. So our water is what I call hard. So when I travel to places where they have soft water, it tastes slimy to me because it just has no hardness, and I'm used to this hard flavor that I get from the city of Houston. So some of your filters that you put on your faucet will only do that. They will make the water softer, basically. It tastes a little bit better, maybe your hair is shinier, whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're aiming to sort of remove some of these micropollutants, what you really want is a different kind of filter. That type of filter would actually go outside your home on the big pipe, and that would be perhaps a little more expensive kind of technology. So that's certainly an excellent question. For me, I went from groundwater, which I thought tasted great, but then we moved to an area which is served by the city of Houston, and surface water. Even in the area where we used to live, we were on groundwater. switched to surface water. It was a big shock. The water definitely tasted different to me. But at the end of the day, it's kind of the idea that, your bottled water has almost nothing in it. It's really totally ultra-filtered. And there's this emerging thought by health professionals that that's not good for you either. You need a little bit of something to build your immunity, to give you the, whatever, right? The micronutrients, a little bit of calcium, a little bit of a hardness. So personally, I do not filter my water at home, inside or outside. Just take it as is from the city, gladly. And John, I do have a brown yard, a tan. I call it the new color, the new Houston, is tan. So I don't think grass, honestly, is really the entire answer to the problem, because I know you said we have plenty of water, but the fact is my yard is tan. It's not green. And I am trying to water only on Wednesdays and Fridays, being the good citizen that I am.
Thank you.
But it's certainly going to do a lot to my trees. As I mentioned, I have one that's really stressed out, beginning to crack on the exterior, which means I'm going to have some structural problems. I have an older home, so my foundation will need some repair. And, trees are being chopped all over the neighborhood. Memorial Park, half the trees are totally stressed out. Same goes for McGregor Park. They were chopping down trees as we speak today and this week. So when you think about water, all that we ask is perhaps you think about it in a different light, but it has many dimensions. Water is life, and as we worry about energy, we probably should worry about our water as well, for a variety of different reasons.
Can I just address her brown lawn?
We're not brown, it's
not tan.
Stan.
All right.
Wait, and I didn't talk about dethatching.
Oh, okay.
Dethatching.
Yeah.
No chemicals.
No chemicals. Well,
Just
I'll tell you, I do follow to the letter the requirements of the city. In fact, we don't water twice a week.
You don't.
We do not water twice a week because we have done the right thing by adding compost to our soil and building the soil food web, building the sponge that's there. And so it actually holds enough water to where we can get by with watering once a week or even less. Just do the right thing.
I wondered, in looking at some of the other slides that were presented tonight, one thing that struck me, June, for a moment was, I don't know the answer to this. You showed the different lakes that provide a lot of the water supply for the city of Houston, and you talked about, I think, how Lake Conroe traditionally has not been used for a very long period of time, and I think Lake Houston had a very low percentage of where you're getting the water from. Could you talk for a moment about why that is? I mean, I've heard it said that we do actually drain a lot of really municipal waste right into tributaries that ends up getting into Lake Houston. Is the quality of the water coming from Houston or Conroe impacting the city's decision at all to try to limit the use coming out of those lakes?
No, not really. The main reason is the water rights distribution among those lakes. Lake Livingston, we have the largest water rights permit. We have 900 million gallons a day permit from Lake Livingston. So majority of the water supply we take, for example, there's 3 surface water treatment plant. The east plant is a 300 million gallons a day plant. We take 90% of the water from Lake Livingston and 10% from Lake Houston. And southeast plant, we take entirely from Lake Livingston. And it's the infrastructure, it's the water rights, and Lake Conroe is built specifically as a backup for Lake Houston. When the Lake Houston level is low, we will ask SJRA, San Jacinto River Water Authority, who is contracted with the city of Houston to run the Lake Conroe Dam, will release water from Conroe to fill Lake Houston. And that has not happened very often in 50 years of Lake Conroe was built. It only happened twice prior to this year, 1985. We released the once, 1988 we released the once, and then this year we request them to release 150 million gallons a day from Lake Carmel. And that's not because Lake Houston doesn't have enough quantity. It's because the intake infrastructure that we built for the Northeast Plan requires a certain level of water maintained at Lake Houston.
Thank you. With that, we've got a lot of new questions that are coming in from the audience. So, Tom, you had a couple?
There are a lot of questions here. It's hard to sort through them all. Is it an option to reclaim the concreted bayous? And is it possible to clean the water that enters the bayous so that the bayous themselves will be cleaner?
It is possible to reclaim them, but it's a little bit expensive. There's concrete, et cetera, and it's serving a certain purpose. So perhaps with time, one of the things that the Harris County Flood Control is doing, our main drainage authority, at least for Harris County, is trying to, I showed you the picture of Bray's Bayou, and they are now in a project to widen it. And so in some places, at least, they have put some wetlands along the side there, for example, where the park is there, Mason Park, along 75th Street. So there are a lot of things, obviously, that we can do to clean the water. Number one is your yard, the kind of things that I talked about there, reducing the chemical kinds of inputs. So any place that you can help water get into the ground, either increase the infiltration in your yard, elsewhere, you can use things like green roofs, etc. And in general, just limit the amount of land that's developed. The more prairies, the more forests we have, those kind of things, the cleaner the water is going to be.
I'd follow up with that around our reservoirs and the tributary waterways. Should these kinds of programs be implemented to make sure that runoff is filtered through wetlands or swales before it enters our food chain?
Is that for me or for Jim?
I think it's for you.
For me, okay. Well, you showed the picture there from HGAC that shows just about every square foot of land in that area being developed. It certainly would make sense to leave a buffer along the lakes. I mean, that doesn't get it all, but obviously, the stuff that's the closest to the lake has less of a chance for cleansing, etc. So, and I don't know if the city considers the need for any kind of a buffer of undevelopment along those lakes or not.
We actually did. I mentioned the Loose Bayou project. When we were planning for the Loose Bayou project, Coastal Water Authority, whose contract with the City of Houston is going to be the one build the Loose Bayou project, actually engaged a consultant to study the feasibility of a wetland around Lake Houston. The idea is when the Loose Bayou water come from Trinity, they will go through this wetland and get kind of filtered before they go into Lake Houston. The conclusion of that study come back is it's not economically feasible for several reasons. The cost of the land, because I don't remember who showed the slide. You can see the lake now is almost fully developed. And when you have all those residential area, you try to buy land for wetland, it's going to be very expensive. And secondly, because of the total difference, you have to pump the water from the wetland into the lake. The electricity cost, the cost of the pump station make this idea or this project economically unfeasible.
But one area that we can have wetlands are our storm drain detention basins. We can't build in this area without putting a big hole in the ground, basically, because we pave the soil and that keeps water from going in and then runoff and flooding. So we have to, engineer some detention volume for that. So we're going to have to do that. But here we are in this very wet environment. We've got all kinds of wetlands. What a perfect place to engineer some wetlands into those stormwater detention areas, where all of our stormwater must run off anyway. So it requires, a little bit more space than you would typically have in a flood detention kind of a pond or basin. But it doesn't take that much, and it would give us the clean water. We'd have the birds and the wetlands, etc. it's a win-win for sure.
Dr. Jacob, let me challenge you for a moment on something that you said in your prepared remarks. One of the things that really stood out to me was you talked about towards the end, and you really wanted to make this a serious point, that you believe that there is not the political will to talk about and make some of the tough decisions on conserving and talk openly.
Yeah.
So the challenge for you is how can you make that statement today, and in what context, when the city's currently initiated water conservation measures?
No, they haven't. That is, well, they do have water conservation measures, but the measures that we are in right now, those aren't water conservation. Those are water shortage measures. That's not water conservation. That's a whole different thing, okay? So don't want to give the impression that the city doesn't think about water conservation. June very clearly showed that, yes, they do, and have done a lot of good work. No doubt about it. But I would argue that in terms of doing what might be needed for Galveston Bay, as I said, it's not a settled question as of yet. There's a lot of arguments about it. But why not do that anyway? Region H, which is the water planning authority for the whole area, not just City of Houston, in the current plan, the stated amount of conservation that they forecast for the next 40, 50 years is 6%. 6% is a paltry, measly amount. It's nothing. It is within the range of their predicted variability for 40 years out. You can't predict plus or minus 6% in terms of population, etc. So we can do a lot better. And as we saw from San Antonio, yes, education, those kind of things can make a difference. So it's a question of where it is. Sure, they're doing some conservation, they're doing some good things, but I would argue that it's not to the level that it needs to be if in fact those scientists who are arguing for more water for the bay, etc., and the agreement that's been cut is a great one for the return flows, but there's still this issue, is there enough? So, and I would argue it's not that tough to do. We ought to do it, but the bay has to be way up here in our priorities. And I don't think it is.
I mean, in some ways, I want to point out one of the things, maybe, June, that you said is that we're using about 650 million gallons. That was today, or 2 days ago, or 3 days ago. But there's just 4 or 5 million people in the city of Houston. That is a ginormous amount of water per capita. I mean, obscene would be the word that I would use. So when we talk about 5 or 6% not being enough, I mean, there's reason, really, to say that. But we should aim higher. Even if we have the water, we should do better because it's the right thing to do. So.
And I want to thank you for those of you who actually followed the City of Houston's conservation guideline, and I want to specifically point out to Rice University and the University of Houston. The mayor mentioned that in her press conference today. And Rice University, for example, by using the condensation in the AC unit, saved 12 million gallons of water. So, kudos to them.
That might be a great note to close on, but there's one question from last week that a couple of people have mentioned to me again, and so I found this card. Should we be encouraging the safe use of gray water as a long-term conservation measure? Perhaps for watering our beige lawns?
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of issues with gray water. It requires additional piping. But we've used, I mean, there's a difference, of course, between gray water and reused water, right? And the purple pipe issue, that we do have a pretty strong program reusing that kind of water. So gray water, just to make sure everybody's clear, that's water that's not black water. So that would be the water out of your sinks, the dishwasher, and the showers, I think, are a little on the kind of dark gray. They're dark gray. That's difficult there. So there are some issues with that. So yeah, I think we do, but it would require, basically replumbing your house so you have a different, the gray water is going somewhere different than it is the regular water. So the problem, though, I mean, it's kind of a conceptual problem here. I just had a conversation with a colleague the other day talking about this, and he said, well, John, you know, you can't get people excited unless you tell them you don't have enough drinking water. Well, we don't have that, right? I believe what June's telling us here. So it's hard, you know, so when you talk about gray water, it's kind of hard to, you know, get people excited about doing that. I think it'd be more profitable for us to think about the bay. And that's going to be a challenge for us right there. How do we convince people? That's not drinking water. You're not telling people you don't have enough for your shower. We're just saying, do we have enough for the bay? And that's really our conservation challenge here, I think. And so,
Well, although, I mean, in June's defense, I like your idea about credit, just like they do in the power industry. If you put solar panels, you can put back into the grid, you know, you get credit. I'd like that. I'll do it if you said, well, if you use less water, you get credit for doing that. I'll definitely sign me up.
well, there's no question that pricing, I mean, on top of all the education and demonstrations, those kind of things, and a lot of cities have shown this, particularly if you have a higher pricing regime during the summer, when things are a little more elastic. It's less elastic during the wintertime, but in the summertime, you know, get that pricing up. And Houston does have a increment, it's a higher price, but not by much. I don't think, I mean, you wouldn't feel it. If you overwater your lawn, sure you're paying more, but it's not enough to make you cry. That's cry for the bay.
Well, I think I agree with John on a lot of things he mentioned. I think you definitely have to have a conscience to do that voluntarily, because economics certainly is not a reason for you to do that. And the reason is the price for water, as Dr. Rifai shows you, is very cheap. So for you to putting a separate piping system at a home to use gray water, you have to ask yourself, because you know it's not going to be paying back. So you do this, it's not for money, you do that for the conscience to protect the environment. How many people wants to do that? That's up to you. I also agree with what John said. You know, Houston does have a staging price. When you increase your water usage, exceed 12,000 gallons a month, your price doubles. The more you use, the more you pay. But again, our rate is so low. I mean, if you live in El Paso, you live in San Antonio, it's going to hurt your pocket real bad. But you live in Houston, and Houston is among the lowest water rates among the states. So you look at your water bill thinking, well, it's not going to hurt that much. I'm taking my 20 minutes shower instead of your 5 minutes shower, as John promoted. So
That's why I start gray.
I'm not going there.
Because the dilution is the solution, right? I'm sorry.
Fresh water, not fish.
Absolutely.
You know, talking about cost of water is interesting, and it brings to mind something that I don't think a lot of people know about the municipal water system, but that's that there are some for-profit customers of the City of Houston's water system. If I'm not mistaken, I think Anheuser-Busch is a very, very large customer. We sell our water to them. And I wonder, in the context of at a time while we do have water shortages, water shortage measures being implemented in the city, can you talk for a little bit about, does Anheuser-Busch or other corporations, do they pay more or do they get the same rate?
You're right. It's the largest single commercial customer that we have. But they are actually doing the conservation themselves because they have to stay competitive in the market. They actually approached us about a year and a half ago and say, you know, if we can show you we have reduced the water used per barrel to produce beer, can you give us a price break? And we said, well, why shouldn't we? Then we talked about, you know, promoting water conservation, and we said that seemed to be the right thing to do. So we revised our contract. We did allow them to take credit for conservation, only to show you're not reducing your production. You have to show me that you produce same amount of beer using less water. Then I will give you credit. And your second part of the question is, during this drought, whether they be treated differently? No, they are not. The city ordinance as it is now, treat everybody the same. At least in stage 2, it is a mandatory, but no contract customer will be required to reduce their usage. However, we do strongly encourage them to take water conservation measures. We are sending a letter to every one of our contract customers, urge them to invoke their drought contingency plan, to invoke their water conservation plan. But if this drought condition continues, then we go into stage 4, which is a very severe stage in which we have to ration the water. Then everybody will be affected. And those customers, of course, will be affected as well.
There's no beer exemption then.
No, sir.
It's serious.
But the price figures that Hanadi showed us, Budweiser is looking a lot cheaper than water. So, in the meantime,
I don't care what
this
color.
break. I think with that, we've had a great series, which I've really enjoyed. It's been very helpful to me. I really appreciate everyone's involvement, and I really appreciate your being here. I want to thank you for coming and remind you that there are some brochures at the back that Jason's been kind enough to bring for us. Thank you all.